Welcome to this tutorial video. This video is aiming to cover the material in week 3 of CS120. So this is the third practical to do with the triathlon. So the scenario is the same. We still have a triathlon event and we're still supposed to be recording hours, minutes and seconds for the swim, the bike and the run. There's a bit of a difference this time around in that we've now been told how we should be storing these pieces of data. The worksheet says that you are required to store the times of the events only in seconds, and you'll have an array of 4 values storing the total seconds for the swim, the bike, the run and the overall event. So we previously had 9 integers to store the data entered by the user. We had an integer to hold the swim hours, an integer to hold the swim minutes, one for the swim seconds, etc., for all of the events. We've now been told that we should be storing our data as an array, and that an array of size 4 will be enough because we're going to store all the data as total seconds. So we're going to have to add up the times to get total number of seconds and store that in an array. So we should start off by creating an array. Let's call it, for example, I'm going to call it totals. And I'm going to initialize that. So this is an array of type int and it is size 4. So there are 4 places in that array for an integer. 4 integers can fit in that array. The worksheet says that the software should use a for loop to produce output on the serial port in exactly the following format. And the format is basically the same as the format for the previous worksheet. It just has the event name first. So for example, swim time, x hours, space, x minutes, space, x seconds, full stop. And we need to print that out for the swim, the bike, the run and the total time. We're also reminded that the minutes and seconds values should also still be less than 60. So we need to remember to do that. Task 1 is to just think about how we need to change our code from last week. We don't need to do any programming for that, so we'll just do this now. It says that, here we go, what type should we use for the array of times? And it gives us a hint, and that is how many seconds are there in 10 hours. Well, so I created an array type int, and is this the right choice? Well, let's use that hint. How many seconds are there in 10 hours? Well, that's 10 hours times by 60 minutes times by 60 seconds, and that's equal to 36,000. Right, so who cares? Why is that important? Well, this is where knowing a little bit about the types that you use is important. On an Arduino, an integer can represent a number from minus 32,768 to 32,767. This is because it is 16 bits wide, so we have 2 to the power of 16, and because we want to represent negative numbers and positive numbers, that range is distributed from negative to positive. So this is our range. This is the range of numbers that we can fit into an integer. 36,000 quite clearly is bigger than 32,767. So what will happen if we try and set an integer to be 36,000? Well, we can check. It's very easy. We just create a new integer called test, and we say it's equal to 36,000, and we'll print it out. Upload that and see what we get. Now, we're probably expecting it to be 36,000, but because an integer cannot hold 36,000 because it is not big enough. It cannot represent 36,000. What we actually get is minus 29,536. So what's happened is that that number is so big that it's actually gone past the end of the range that we can represent using an integer, and it's wrapped back around to the beginning. Perhaps an easier way to explain this is to use a slightly smaller data type just to get the point across. So a byte is 8 bits in size. So 2 to the power of 8, 256. So if we create a new byte and we assign it to the value of 255, then that's okay because a byte can represent from 0 to 255, which is 256 different values. If we were to assign it to 256, then that would wrap back around to the beginning of what a byte could represent. In this case, that's 0 because we go from 0 to 255. So if we set a byte to be 256, and print that out, like so, upload that, then that will be 0. I'm just going to upload. It's uploaded. There we go, a 0. And that's not what we want. Of course, it carries on wrapping, so if we put in 257 and upload that, we're going to get a 1. So it just wraps all the way around. Like so. Okay, so we don't want to use an integer because an integer is not big enough. What do we want to use? Well, the next sort of step up is something called a long int, or just a long, and it can represent significantly larger numbers. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think many billions in size. So a long should be more than suitable to hold our total seconds. And we can check that if we really need to, but I assure you that it is. We also need to consider how we should change our code from the previous week. Currently, we are reading in 9 values, and once we've finished reading them all in, I'm doing a bit of maths here to convert that, well, not convert that, to make sure that the seconds and minutes are not more than 60. However, now we've been told that we should store things in an array. So we don't actually need these integers anymore, and we should get rid of them. What should we replace them with, though? Previously, we were reading in, this is the first piece of data being entered is the swim hours, and we were assigning an integer called swim hours to be what the user typed in. This time, however, we're going to store this directly in our array. I've made the arbitrary decision that the first element in our array, so totals 0, is going to hold the swim total seconds, and 1 is going to be the bike, 2 is going to be the run, and 3 is going to be just the total number of seconds. I just decided to make it that way around because that's what I want to do. It sort of makes sense in that the swim time is entered first, and then the bike time, and then the run time, and the total is calculated at the end. So in my head that makes sense, but it doesn't honestly matter. Like so. Okay, so the user enters in a number, and we need to store this somewhere in the array. So this is the swim, so it should be stored in the first element of the array, or totals 0. And we don't want to just store the number they've entered in, because remember, we're trying to store the total number of seconds. So if the user has entered in the hours, then we should multiply this by how many seconds there are in an hour. So if they entered in, for example, 2 hours, we should work out how many seconds are in 2 hours and store that in our totals array. Well, there are 3,600 seconds in an hour, so we can multiply what the user typed in by 3,600, and we're going to assign total 0 to be equal to that. Now we should move on to the swim minutes. Again, we can get rid of our integer variable and replace it this time with our array again. This time we need to multiply the value that the user has entered by the number of seconds in a minute, because what they are entering in is the swim minutes. So there are 60 seconds in a minute. The other difference is that we don't want to say that totals 0 or the first element in the totals array is equal to what the user has entered, because that element of the array already contains how many seconds, well, the hours part. So we've already taken how many hours the swim has taken and multiplied it by 3,600 and stored it in total 0. So if we were to just do this and to assign the total 0 to be what the user has now entered in, then we're going to lose that. We're going to overwrite what has previously been stored there. What we actually want to do is we want to add that new number, and we can do this by saying that total 0 is equal to total 0 plus serial.parseInt multiplied by 60. A shorthand for this is saying plus equals. So plus equals basically says that total 0 is equal to total 0 plus all of this. So that's a handy shorthand. We move on to swim seconds. Again, we don't need our integer variable. We can replace it with totals 0. Again, we want to be adding to total 0, not assigning. And since they're entering in seconds, we don't need to do any multiplication. So we've now taken in all of the information for the swim event. We've taken the hours, minutes, the seconds. We've multiplied the hours by 3,600, the minutes by 60, and we've not done anything to second. And we've added them all together and stored them in totals 0. So the first element in the totals array. The rest is basically a copy and paste job. It's just the same. We're just storing things in different places. So for the bike, I can get rid of the bike integer, totals 1 this time, which is the second element in the array, is going to be equal to serial.parseInt. Because they're entering in hours, we need to multiply it by 3,600, and etc, etc. So I'll just quickly enter in all of that, and we'll pick up when I'm done. Okay, so we've entered in all of that. We're now storing in the total number of seconds for each of the 3 events in 3 places in our array. So we're storing the total swim seconds in the first element of our array, the total bike seconds in the second element of our array, and the total run seconds in the third element of our array. The worksheet says that we should also store the total number of seconds. So we can store that in the 4th element of the array, so which is totals 3, and we can assign totals 3 to be the sum of the first, second, and third element of our array, which we can do by saying it's equal to total 0 plus total 1 plus totals 2. totals 3, or the fourth element of the array, now contains the sum of the first 3 elements of the array. We now have all of the total seconds that the worksheet says that we should store, and we can move on, I think, to the next task. So what we've just done is task 2, which was read in the required values from the serial port, convert them to total seconds for each event, store them in the correct element of the array, and calculate the total time for the event and store this in the array. We can now move on to task 3, which says we should use a for loop to output the event times in the format specified in the scenario. It says that your equations may be slightly different from last week, but they should use the same operators and principles. There's a hint again that we should use an array called string names that contains a few strings that might be helpful. So we'll take them up on the hint. We might as well use it if it's here. So we have string names. This is an array of strings, and it contains swim, bike, run, and total. Okay. Now, all this is the calculations that we did for the previous worksheet, and unfortunately we can't really use those anymore because they relied on having separate hours, minutes and seconds components stored for each event. So we're actually going to have to delete this. This print statement we could probably repurpose later on, so I'll just comment it out. So we should be using a for loop to output the event times in the specified format. We'll start with the for loop and worry about the format after we've got that working. So the format for a for loop, we need to know how many times we want to loop. There are three events, but there are 4 times. There's total seconds for swim, bike, run, and overall. So we need to loop 4 times to print out 4 different things. We start at 0, int I equals 0, I is less than 4, I plus plus, and here's our for loop. So that everything inside this for loop will happen 4 times because I will start at 0, be incremented each time around the loop, and once it is no longer less than 4, then it will exit. So we will have 0, 1, 2, 3, and then we will break out the loop. Now we need to work out what goes inside of this loop. To start off, let's just make sure that we're adding up the times, the seconds properly. We're just going to print out each element of the array. We could do this by printing out totals, which is the name of the array, and then specifying the index as I. So the first time around the loop, I will be 0, and that will be the first element of the array. The second time around the loop, I will be 1, and so that will be the second element of the array, etc., etc., till we've printed out all 4. So I'll just upload that, and we can enter in some values that should be easy to check. Probably the easiest would be 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second for each event, which should be 3600 plus 60 plus 1, so 3661. And we could just check if that is true. So 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second, 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second, 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second. Yep, so 3661 3 times for each of the events, and then a total of 10983. Looks about right. Okay, so we're definitely adding up the seconds correctly. Let's work out how to separate out the hours, minutes and seconds from the total seconds. I'm going to create 3 integers, event hour, event minute, and event seconds. Okay, we'll start at hours. Hours it will be the number of total seconds for this event, so totals, I, divided by the number of seconds in an hour, so 3,600. This means that if we have less than an hour's worth of seconds, for example, the total seconds is 2, and we divide that by 3,600, then we're going to get 0 because there are no hours represented there. If our total number of seconds for that event was 3,602, then if we divided that by 3,600, we would get 1 because there's 1 hour in that total number of seconds. Now we're indexing the array using I again because we want this calculation to happen for each element in the array, because we want this to be done for the swim time, the run time, the bike time, and the total time. And since we have a variable that is counting up from 0 to 3, we can use that to index the array, to access the element of the array that we want. Event minutes, we can extract the minutes from a total number of seconds by first eliminating any hours in it. So if we get totals I, so the total number of seconds for that event, instead of dividing by 3,600, we modulus by 3,600. So modulus gives us the remainder after dividing. So this is basically saying what's left over after dividing totals I, or the total number of seconds, by 3,600. This means that if there is more than an hour's worth of seconds in the total number of seconds, we're going to get what's left over after removing the hours. Again, if we had 3,602 seconds, we modulus that by 3,600, we're going to get 2 seconds left over. We then need to divide that by 60 to get how many minutes are in that seconds, or in the seconds left over. And we can then work out how many seconds are left. Same sort of principle. We want to do totals I modulus by 3,600, and then we want to modulus the result of that with 60, and that should give us how many seconds are left over. So we're effectively eliminating any hours from the total seconds, and then any minutes, and anything that's left over is a second. Right, we're going to just repurpose this print line here and replace these with totals. Oh no, we're not. Event hour. So we should now be able to print this out and see if it is working. Just comment out that. I'll enter in the same values as I did the previous time, 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second. So then the program will turn that into a total number of seconds, and then when it prints it out, it will turn that back into hours, minutes, and seconds. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Does it work? It does work. Okay, we're almost there now. What we have to do is we need to check if the total seconds are greater than 60. Do the values carry correctly to the minutes? We need to check if the event takes more than 10 hours, is the output correct, and is the output in exactly the format specified in the scenario. We'll start with that last one first. The format is not correct because it just says total time for each one. It should say swim time, bike time, run time, total time. Otherwise the format looks to be correct. Now this is where our hint comes in handy, this array of names here, and we can use that in our print statement by saying names I, and then add that to the rest of the string. This means that the first time around this loop, names I is going to be swim. So we can say swim time and then hours, minutes, seconds. The second time, names I will be bike. So it's going to say bike time and etc. etc. that should be the format taken care of now. Now we need to check if the event takes more than 10 hours, is the output correct? We don't need to change any of our code because it should be, because we're turning hours, minutes, seconds into total seconds. We're storing that in a long, so that should be more than big enough to store all of that. But we'll just test that in a minute. And if the total seconds are greater than 60, do the values carry correctly to the minutes? Again, we can just test that now. I'll just upload that, and I'll use the values that you were told to use to test your program, which is 1, 59:59, 7, 59:59, 1, 59:59. So that's 1 hour, 59 minutes, 59 seconds, 7 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds, etc., etc. Enter that in, and you can see that the times are correct here, and the total time is correct. So it is 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 57 seconds. You can see that this total time is greater than 10 hours, which is what we were asked to check. And it is still displaying correctly, it still added them up correctly. I believe that that is the end of the worksheet. Yeah, it is. I will quickly cover this print statement because it's quite long and a little bit complicated. And I've been using print statements like this before, so it's probably worth explaining it. What we have here is lots of variables, and these are sort of string constants, the little bits of text in double quotes, stuck together, and we're using the plus to add them together, but we're not adding them as if we were adding two numbers really. What we're doing is joining them together. So this plus actually can mean slightly different things, or is used in slightly different ways in different situations. In this case, when we're gluing things together, it is concatenating two things together, two variables, two bits of text, two numbers. And it is fairly intelligent about how it does this, so it tries to guess how you want to add two things together. However, it doesn't always get it right, as in it doesn't always correctly guess what you mean to do. And that is why I have these string things in bracket. That is because this plus doesn't necessarily understand what you mean when you say event hour plus hour space. Because event hour is an integer and hour space is an array of characters or a string. So it's not quite sure what you mean. Does it mean add, this number to the pointer of this, or it's going to do what it thinks is best. However, I know that I want to treat this number as if it were a piece of text, as if it was a piece of string. A string. So I've put this cast, and this is what it is in brackets. I've written string before this because I want this number to be treated as a piece of text. That means that this plus sign understands that that's how it should operate. It means that it knows that I want this to be treated as a piece of text, and this is a piece of text. So concatenate them together, don't literally add them together. You can see what happens if you don't do this. I can just run a little experiment. So if we do serial.println, whoops, let's have a number in A equals 2. For example, if I were to say hello colon plus A. So in my head, what I want to happen is I want it to print out hello colon and then the value that is stored in the variable A. If I upload that, that's not what's going to happen. and I guess it might print out LLO. Let's have a look. Yeah, it does. Okay, so that's definitely not what we meant to happen, but it is what's happened. And that's because it has literally added this number to, not to this string really, but the pointer to this string points at the first element, and if we add 2 to that, we're going to start pointing at the third element. So in this case, that's what happened. Because it's doing the wrong sort of adding, it's not concatenating really, it's literally plussing them together. Now we can make it print out what we like by casting A to a string. So say treat A like it is a string. If I upload that now, we're going to get hello colon 2. Okay, so that works. Now, you don't have to do print statements like this. I do it because it's nice to have everything on one line, but you could also print out the same thing like this. So you could print out bits one at a time. So we could print out names I, not system, and then we can print out a bit of text afterwards. So we can do time, and then we could print out event hour. Okay, so we could print it out like this instead. We're printing out each bit separately. So we're printing out the names, and then the time, and then the event hour, and then that little bit of text, and then the event minutes, etc., etc. We can do that. However, this takes up a lot more sort of screen space than this, and I think that this is actually fairly easy to understand. And actually, it's fairly easy to understand, but you know, I don't know. I personally prefer this. If you print it this way, then you don't have to do any of these casts because serial.print understands how to print an individual number. That's fine. It's sort of personal preference. I tend to go with this sort of format, adding things together like this. But like I said, you can choose to do whatever you like. I think I will leave it there. I think we've covered quite a lot today. I hope it's been useful. If it is, please let me know, and I will think about making more videos for other practicals.